So our first speaker today is fiduciary Pablo O'Brien. He's a licensed California fiduciary and a national certified guardian. His business name is South Laurel Group in San Carlos. So one thing I hadn't thought about a fiduciary being able to offer is referrals to other professionals. Pablo has on the South Laurel Group website that he has connections with property managers, elder law attorneys, financial managers, and that makes him an even more valuable person to have on your team. So Pablo, take it away.
Thanks, Denise. As Denise mentioned, I'm a fiduciary, and I always have to explain to people what that is. I have to explain to my family over and over again what that is. It's a profession that hasn't been around that long, but the work has been around for a long time. So I always say I break my work into two pieces. The first is when I'm working with my clients who need my help in managing their financial and practical affairs, and sometimes their medical care affairs, while they're still alive. And for whatever reason, perhaps they've lost some capacity, perhaps they have some chronic illness, and they don't have someone that can step in and be the primary coordinator of all of these services. Fiduciaries are licensed in California. You can go, later on I have a link you can look at. You can go onto the California government website to look at, to search for fiduciaries in your area and by the sorts of skills that you might want, language and that sort of thing. And you can also check to see if there are any complaints, ethical violations, any sort of sanctions against that fiduciary, which obviously would be a bit of a red flag, but it's if someone is convicted, sort of found guilty of doing something unethical, as they used to say back in grade school, it goes on your permanent record. So that's a good way to check for people. Let me just talk real quickly about what the process is. I am often brought in by either a caregiver, an estate attorney, sometimes a financial advisor, and they're bringing me in when they sense that one of their clients could use some help in doing things like paying bills, managing taxes, sometimes practical matters around the house, arranging for electrical work or handyman or gardeners, and all those sorts of things. And I get called in and I essentially have a conversation with the person that I'm working with and the people around them. And I say, what are the things that you need help with? And everybody's a little different. Some people are comfortable taking on certain parts of their daily tasks, but not others. And that can change also, particularly with chronic illness, as people go through the progression of that illness. What they need today may not be what they need in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So I document everything. What is this person like? Do they have a particular way of living in the world that they want to continue doing? Are they religious people? Do they have a family? Who needs to be informed about these things? And then to the extent that they need it, I step in and I say, look, I will do things like manage daily bills, financial affairs, gather tax information for the tax accountant. I'm not a tax accountant, but I do know the information that they need. I will work with their investment advisors if necessary to make sure that they're invested appropriately for their stage of life. And I'll act as their power of attorney in financial matters, and I'll do everything from making sure that the PG&E is being taken care of to and any of the other myriad things that need to be handled, including working with assisted living facilities for payments and any other sorts of things. And the other thing I do is I manage the support team, or to the extent that I'm needed. And I will talk a little bit about that in a minute. The other part of my job is I am a professional trustee. So I administer trusts for people who either don't have someone to do it, or sometimes in family situations, they don't, there's maybe some contention or some friction, and they want a trusted third-party objective person managing the trust for people both for while they're alive and when they pass away, and the distributions for that. And my goal is I honor my clients' wishes in all their endeavors. So I work a little differently with everybody. I don't have a one size fits all. A good fiduciary will come in and assess the situation and plug the holes that need to be plugged and make sure things keep working. So your support team, you may not even think about it, but it's probably pretty broad. They're all the people that you work with to make sure that your loved one is being taken care of. So anywhere from trust attorneys to property managers, if there's rental property, accountants, and then you go all the way through caregivers and medical providers. Who's taking care of the house? Their gardeners, are there housekeepers, IT service providers, who's making sure that the Wi-Fi is still going. Neighbors are really important for some people. Your physical therapists, all of these people. What I do is I kind of come in and I document who are all these people, what's the contact information, who needs to be kept in the loop for certain things. And sometimes I work with a loved one, often I do. Sometimes I'm doing all of it myself, but sometimes a loved one will just say, hey, the burden is just a little too much for me right now. Can you help me and take some of this off my plate? Or it's a contentious family situation and my siblings are upset about the way things are going, or the person who's being taken care of, their siblings. Can you come in and be, again, the objective third party that's taking care of things, and don't put me in the firing line? I'm not going to cover this. I'm not an attorney. I work very closely with attorneys, but these are the documents that allow me to do my job. What's the power of attorney? Usually I work as a financial power of attorney, sometimes as the medical power of attorney if there's nobody available. What am I authorized to do? Can I pay taxes? Can I sell property? Can I rent property? Can I manage investments? Can I pay the bills? Advanced healthcare directives and POLSTs, posts, those help me, of course, when I'm working as a medical power of attorney, in addition to my conversation with people to make sure I really understand their wishes in this case. And then a trust, I'm sure everyone on here knows about it, but a trust just basically says, here are all the assets. They're for the benefit of the beneficiary. While the beneficiary is alive, they should be used for that purpose in the way that the trustor wants it managed. When that person passes away, then it should be distributed in the way they want it as well. The last thing I would say is, I always say, what do you do? I do what friends or family would do if they were local, because a lot of people have friends and family who would be happy to do it, but they live in Hong Kong or they live in New York, and they're not physically present. And also, sometimes people don't have the time. They have jobs. They are maybe they don't feel they have the necessary skills. They're not great with money. They're great people, but that's not their skill set. They're not organized, or they just don't. They're not plugged into all of the other roster of professionals that need to be there to help people. So fiduciaries, they're not for everybody, but in some situations where, as I mentioned, maybe the person isn't local, the person doesn't have the skill set, or in some case, some of my clients, there simply isn't a person. They don't have children, they don't have a partner, they came to the Bay Area to work, and now, years later, they're here and they're dealing with some sort of debilitating illness and they need support. And that's what I do, and I step in and do that, and then manage the trust if and when they pass away. And that's essentially what a professional fiduciary does. And I think I've run out of time, so I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Let's see. So I was of the impression, or at least the fiduciary that my sister works with is a financial investor. It's her alternative to like Fidelity. So is there Is there that broad of a range in the word fiduciary?
There is. So fiduciary is a very confusing term, and I don't love that we don't have a better way of phrasing. You will hear Fidelity say, we are fiduciaries. And what that means is, in a very narrow context for an investment professional, a fiduciary, the only real definition is you have a fiduciary, a financial responsibility of trust to your client. Investment professionals have that when it comes to investments. Tax accountants have that when it comes to taxes. A California licensed professional fiduciary kind of has it across the board for all of these different things. I always say I'm an inch deep and a mile wide, right? I know a little bit about a whole bunch of different things. I know a little bit about accounting. I know a little bit about taxes, a little bit about investment, a little bit about care management. But I typically assemble a roster of professionals who know how to do those things really well. And I am the person making sure everybody gets paid. I'm making sure that there are no gaps in that coverage. And so that's what, when you hear about a professional fiduciary, that's what we typically do. It's a little different than the Look, I know enough about investments to be dangerous. I am not licensed to make investments for my clients. I will find an investment professional and talk about the strategy and the person's place in their, where they are in their life and what's the right risk profile and that sort of thing. They go ahead and do the investments.
Yeah. So the difference is professional fiduciary versus investment advisor who is a fiduciary.
That's correct. Yeah. An investment advisor isn't going to come out and make sure that the landscaper is trimming the hedges appropriately and get paid.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
That's me.
And how is your fee structure scheduled so people can have an idea of what to expect if they wanted to hire you?
Sure. So I work in two different ways. When I'm working as a power of attorney for people, a flat hourly rate, and I charge $195 an hour. Okay. I document everything that I do. I produce an invoice on a monthly basis. They can read all the work that I did. And so far, nobody has had complaints about that. The second way I do, which people also haven't had complaints, is when I actually take over the trust and I act as a professional trustee, and I take a percentage of the trust. And that typically ranges between 1% and 1.5% of the trust while I'm administering it.
Okay. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A.